Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Podcast. I'm Matt, and
I'm Jamie.
There we go. She got it. So Jamie, the question that everybody has been asking: did we continue our streak of good movies? We had The Prince, we had Zombievers, 2 in a row that were good. Did the streak continue? We have High Lane tonight. It's a French film that was dubbed on Netflix. So that's always fun to watch a dubbed film. But
That apparently took place in Croatia.
in Croatia,
I'm not. I want to say that they made a mention of something about being in Croatia
they
before
did.
Okay.
Actually, one thing that's kind of funny in the side, I always watch these movies with the English subtitles for listening purposes.
Uh-huh.
Just so I can if I miss anything, it kind of keeps me
I
in
do the
tune.
same thing.
Yeah. So I don't know if you noticed in this one when one of the characters said Zagreb, it was spelled Zagrape, Zagreb, or Zagreb. So I thought that was pretty great. I don't know who does the English subtitles. Maybe they have something that tries to do it automatically, but
It's there.
yeah,
Don Phonics.
that's the capital of Croatia. Everyone, Zagreb, Zagreb.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that our streak is still solid.
I'm going to say yes too.
I thought this was pretty good.
I did too. The ending for me, it started to devolve into I want to say well-worn territory, but it was a little bit stuff that we've seen before. But
Yeah, it's like Wrong Turn.
yes,
Wrong Turn was the first thing that came to my head. It was like a Croatian Wrong Turn.
yes,
Um, but I mean, you could also see elements of like Texas Chainsaw, or I tend to. That one's a little bit different because maybe it's closer to Hills Have Eyes.
yeah,
Those are two that Brian brought up, and I think probably more so Hills Have Eyes than Texas Chainsaw. Because what I said is that in Texas Chainsaw, the family, even though they are dysfunctional and crazy as hell and cannibalistic, they still manage to be somewhat a part of society in that
hmm
they have a business, and you know no one everyone knows about them, but no one necessarily knows exactly what's going on behind the scenes. They're actually functional members of society for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part.
hmm
Whereas like in Hills Have Eyes, they're completely reclusive and just kind of crazy. In Wrong Turn, they're completely reclusive, and also in both of those, they're mutants,
right,
which this guy didn't appear to be a mutant, but he was very strange in that I think the story was that he was kidnapped when he was 5,
hmm
so he doesn't speak.
right,
He just roars a lot, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I was like, well, for him to be so backwoodsy and he doesn't speak and all of that, he does wear clothes and he does seem to have like he has a crossbow, so he understands how things work.
hmm
He's kind of an interesting character. But anyway, yeah, this is stuff that we've seen before. But I like the way. this was done. I think it was really pretty. We got a lot of beautiful
Yes.
scenery here
Hmm.
during the rock climbing stuff. Now, you are a rock climber.
I am. I am.
How did they do as far as technicalities go? Because that's not my field at all.
Well,
So
so
I
what?
stay on the ground where I'm safer.
Yeah. So this was a unique one because one thing that they did is they were using hiking sneakers.
Uh-huh. I
Uh,
did saw that. Did saw that. I
yeah.
did see
To
that.
see that. So I know from my own experience with hiking sneakers, when I first got into hiking, that's all I had were hiking sneakers. And I can say the moment you start to go on any kind of rock of any sort, your feet will fall off immediately. They are horrible as far as traction goes. Um,
That's what I was kind of, and we actually got some close-up shots of them
yes.
using their feet,
Yeah.
which is how I noticed that's what they were wearing.
Yeah.
I'm like, that doesn't seem right, especially since in a lot of their situations, they were, I mean, like there was the one guy, Fred, who was like free climbing
Yeah.
quite a bit, because he is apparently like he's supposed to be the like he's the best one,
Right.
and he was the leader of this group, and he brought them to this place on purpose. And he made mention of how in the future he had all these plans to go all to these different
Hmm.
places. So this is clearly something that he does all the time.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting
It,
that I noticed the footwear too, is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah, that was one thing. I mean, you the way you would normally do something like this, which is sort of like a combination exercise where you're climbing and hiking, kind of in a doing both. The way you normally would try something like this is you'd carry both. You'd have your hiking shoes with you, your hiking boots, and then you'd have your climbing shoes, or you would have a good pair of just really good hiking boots. That's what you would do the bulk of it with if you could. Um, but I mean, because a lot of it too was just kind of going on the rocks. But there were aspects of it that the film really was able to capture. And the biggest aspect of it for me, like Luke is almost like, even though as a human being, he's very reprehensible, right? The Luke character, who's the one that's
Hmm.
like the novice. Um, but this movie does a good job of making Luke be us. So we have one person that we can really identify with and say, boy, that's what it would be like for me if I had to go up there. Because even though I have experience climbing, I only had slightly more than probably Luke's character did. Like the kind of things that they were doing, the rope bridge,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. Like I've never had experience with that exactly, and so I would be feeling the same way Luke did. But the other thing too is the Fred character really strikes. He kind of reminded me a bit of my friend Mark, only my friend Mark isn't as bad as that guy. Um, but the Fred character being the one that gets people into trouble. He takes them on hikes that they shouldn't take. He
Right.
expects people to be able to do things that they aren't quite capable of doing. Um, and so there were a lot of and just that sense of the remoteness and the height, the danger of being on the rocks there. One thing that really imparts for me, I've been on some ones that have either gone wrong, not to this extent, of course, but you've been in somewhere you're stranded for a bit and you have to figure out how you're going to get out of it. And there is a sense that like you're trapped, that you are a prisoner in this situation, that the area is so remote that you're a prisoner. Maybe you've been hiking and you hike in a really far distance, you don't see anybody else. There's also kind of a sense that you're a prisoner because you can't just get back to
Hmm.
the car, to everything right away. You have to go through, if you're 20 miles out, you've got to go 20 miles back to get to the car. Um, and there's almost like this sense that like you're a prisoner. And I've read accounts of people who've been held hostage or things like that, and like when they see birds and things like that, there's a weird interaction because the bird can just fly away and come back. And you have that feeling, and so this film really captured that at the beginning. It really captured that sense of what it's like to be out in that remote area, to have things go wrong. Even when things go right, you still feel like you're a prisoner of the circumstance, but yet there's reasons why you do it because you can see the really great landscapes.
Right.
Um,
There's a thrill.
yeah.
It also kind of reminded me of The Descent
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, and I don't know if you ever saw that. If you have not, then you should check it out. It's a Neil Marshall film, the same guy who did Dog Soldiers, and it is excellent. Really, I mean, it's just the first part of that film. It goes deeper than this, and there's other stuff going on. But the first part of it deals strictly with this group of women who go spelunking,
Hmm.
and it's harrowing. I mean, it's just because they're in these caverns, and the reason it reminds me of this is because the one who led them there knows full well that they shouldn't be there.
Right.
She doesn't actually have no one has, she knows for a fact no one has ever been in these caverns before,
Mm-hmm.
but she tells them that yes, they're safe. People have been there all the time, that kind of thing. So she misleads them
Yes.
because she wants to do this, and she knows that no
Right.
one else would go along with it if she told them the truth. Kind of like Fred
Yes.
here when he's like, "Yeah, I knew the passage was closed, but I wanted to do this, so
Yeah.
I just said, yeah, it's all good."
Right.
So that's why it reminds me of that. But
Yeah, I've never seen The Descent, but yeah, not to get on my friend Mark too much because he's a really great friend and he's really great about one thing that Fred reminded me too about Mark was that when things were going wrong on the hikes, took care of business.
right,
Like
right.
he helped out his girlfriend right away when the rope bridge snapped. He took care of business, but there is sometimes a sense of like, ooh boy, this is a little bit too adventurous, or this this trip, and notice me. Remember, he made that comment about Luke having the pack. Like, boy, what are you
Yes.
packing for? Right. That's one thing. Mark. Oh, certain. There is a sort of a movement in the hiking community, and my friend Mark is definitely a part of that. And I am to a lesser extent, but the idea that lighter is better. Everything you pack that you don't need is more stress on you. Um,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have
I
that.
mean, it's hard enough. I mean, if you have just the essentials and you're going out for a while, your pack could weigh 30, 40 pounds,
Right.
depending on how long you're going to be gone and how much you need to be prepared for.
Right.
But when you're doing something like this, you can't have that extra weight
Right.
because, I mean, you're already stressing your body enough pulling yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
pulling your own weight
Right.
up the rock. Any little bit that you add to it is only going to tire you out faster, or basically it could end up killing you because you'll be too exhausted.
Right.
Kind of like when they told him to clip his belt, hang from his to clip his damn it
Yes.
to clip to the rung and then hang from his belt, so
Mm-hmm.
and let his arms rest because he was going to tire himself out.
Yeah.
And he was just gripping on, because he was so terrified. And they're like,
Yes.
"Just relax, dude. You're gonna wear
Right.
yourself out." And he's like, "No."
Right.
I mean, I can understand that. Like, I get it. You just saw this bridge go out. So
Yeah.
you're hanging on for dear life. For me, the most harrowing experience I've ever had as far as the outdoors goes is when I got lost in the botanical gardens. And now this was actually pretty scary because botanical gardens was huge,
Hmm.
and it got dark.
Oh yes.
And once it gets dark, the park is closed at dark. But we had gone so far in, and somehow we didn't make it back to the end of the trail by the time it got dark. And then we lost the trail. Like, we
Right.
couldn't see anything. So we're wandering from tree to tree with little lighters, trying to find the markers on the trees, trying to find our way
Hmm.
back. And we were wandering around the botanical gardens for about 4 hours. I
Yeah.
mean, and we ended up completely off trail. We were like hiking these steep hills, and we had to climb over. We had to scale this like it was like a 9-foot fence
Hmm.
to try to get back to. I don't know how we got off that far off course, but it was just because it was so dark. And we had two Labrador puppies with us
Oh jeez.
that by the time we were even halfway through, I ended up carrying mine because she was so exhausted. I mean, she was a tiny little puppy. She didn't have that kind of energy to go for to do what we were doing all day. So like
Hmm.
I ended up carrying the dog and trying to find trying to find markers with a lighter. And that is probably the most harrowing experience I've ever had in the wilderness, and that's not even really that bad. I mean,
But you can at least identify, because like when you finally got out, there's a feeling like you've been released from
oh,
captivity or something.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there was truly more than one moment when we were just like, we're going to have to spend the night here. We can't get out.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no way out. And because we just we couldn't find anything. We're just wandering in the woods, and I'm like, we're gonna have to wait till daylight. There's no
Hmm.
way we can get out of here. And that was scary because it was night in the
Hmm.
woods. We were not prepared to be there. Like, I love camping and all that, but we weren't prepared to
Right.
camp. We had nothing.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to spend the night in the
Of
woods.
course.
I
Yeah.
wanted to go to
No.
the car. So the moment when we finally hit, I mean, I still remember this. When we finally hit the gravel of the little road that runs along the service road,
Yeah.
when we finally found a service road and our feet went from grass to gravel, we knew at that moment that it may be another hour before we get back to the car because we didn't know exactly where we were still, but
Hmm.
we were on civilized
Yes.
property. Then it was just like, oh, thank God.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, so I can multiply that by a whole bunch and get a sense of what it feels like to be in their situation.
Yeah, and I that's what I thought was so amazing about the beginning of this was that it really had
Sounds like
that.
such a right now too.
Oh, yes. It. What did you? Oh, you got disconnected for a second.
I said I sound like such a wuss right now too.
No, no,
Oh,
it
shoot.
because that's what it is that this movie plays upon that feeling, and I think it does a really great job of ramping that up, and then I think it just decides, at what wherever wherever that mark was, I guess it was like the 40-45 minute mark, wherever we get the plot twist, they decided like that was enough, that they couldn't do that to us for 90 minutes, that we'd get bored of it, which I don't know if we ever would have gotten bored of it, but I guess from a storytelling standpoint they felt that would be. But what I liked was that they kind of they it was almost like a passing of the baton from our two forms of fear, right? It's
Oh yeah.
at the same time that Luke's like hanging in his carabiner, which that is the worst, is that when he gets told, just trust it, just like back in the carabiner thing, and he does, and it falls off. The rope starts to
Yeah.
fall off. But that happens at the same time that Fred gets caught in a bear trap, which is the
Which, by the way, looked amazing. That
yes.
that bear trap looked. I mean, it hurt me. I was like looking at it through my fingertips because
Yeah.
it just because you know how in every time someone gets caught in a trap in a movie and their friend tries to help them out and they start prying it open, every single time it snaps back. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm always waiting for that snap back.
Yeah.
So like I'm watching it through my fingers, waiting for her to pry it and open and for it to snap back. And I was
Yeah.
like, it looks so bad. And
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, it looked good, but it looked so painful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was done really well. Actually, I think all the effects were done really well. We didn't get a lot of them, but what we did, they were good. Um, yeah, I think everything looked. I believed it, and I felt like I was right there with them.
Yeah, I didn't think there was anything that was enhanced by computers. There was no, I mean, even the stunts that were being done up high like that, they looked good. They looked real. I don't necessarily think that they had people hanging, from to their death potentially, but the whole thing looked good. It didn't look like they were in. There wasn't like a green screen or something like that.
Brian pointed out one part. It was when the rope bridge snapped and the
Hmm.
cables kind of came whistling back past the
Oh,
camera.
yes, yes,
And he said that looked really digital
yes.
to him. I hadn't noticed it because I wasn't paying that close attention at that time, right then at that second. But um, I, I can forgive it.
Yeah,
I don't really care. If you digitize some cables, I'm not going to be
right.
upset about that. But no, I was pretty impressed. And at first, I thought the dubbing was going to be bad.
Me too.
And then by the time we got through it, I kind of forgot about
Yeah, on my phone here, I actually have the message I was about to type to you this morning about like,
it.
well, it's like, did you watch the movie yet? 'Cause I can't do this; it's dubbed, and then I just kind of gave it a few minutes, and it was like, okay, you know what? It's there's obviously there's a version out there that's French with English subtitles, and Netflix generally doesn't do this. I remember it was the Horde, right? La Horde that we did. That one wasn't dubbed. That one was in French.
Yeah,
Uh,
typically they will give you at least give you the option, and
yeah.
but for the most part they do subtitles. And I usually, and given the option, I will choose
Me
subtitles
too.
over dubbing because dubbing is usually just so bad.
Yeah.
And for the first few minutes here, I was like, I hate it just because it's so obvious. Like the scene where in the very beginning of the movie they're gathering together for a group picture.
Hmm.
She's like, "Come on, take the photo," and then you can hear him in the background. No, no, I don't want to. And this one's like, "Photo op, man," and I'm like, really? I can't. I don't even know how you do that stuff with a straight face when you're in a recording booth. Like, how do you, as a dubber, do this stuff and take it seriously? But then, I let it go, gave it a little time, and before I knew it, I just was kind of into it, so it didn't
Hmm.
bother me at all. I mean, I still knew, but it didn't draw me out of the story. It didn't distract me,
Hmm.
and it didn't seem goofy. Like it really even. Um, Sometimes when there's a dubbing, you can tell because when they're screaming or something like that, it almost sounds like they're trying not to scream really loud, like they're trying
Right.
not to, because they're not actually outside, like they're
Hmm.
trying to, oh no. But this one I really felt like they were, you know, going all in. There's one scene, and it's when Luke is coming across the bridge, and he's like, just do it, to himself, trying to get himself to move across the bridge.
Right.
That part right there stuck out because the actor's lips did not seem to be moving.
Yes.
And then Luke is talking to himself.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that's kind of weird looking. But
Yeah.
other than that, I just sort of went with it. And, it was okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think once the rock climbing takes hold, once we start getting that sort of that peril. I mean, some of those things that they were doing, like the whole thing with the steps on the side of the rock and being clipped into the cable as you go across, like to me, like that just isn't not, even for me as someone who climbs, that's not my idea of a good time.
um, I one thing that I wondered about is he told them about 3 times before they got to the bridge, look, once we get to the bridge, there is no going back.
Right.
There's no way to climb down from here. We have to go all the way to the gondola. There's no, I mean, he said it like 3 times. There's no
Yeah.
going back. And then even told Luke, he's like, are you sure? You can meet us down. You can meet us at the bottom
Yeah.
if you don't want to go across here because there's no going back. Well, then after they all get across and the bridge goes out, then Luke is like, you mean to tell me there's no other way down? I'm like, dude, he told you that like
Right.
3 times.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to decide, what do we do? How do we get down? Where and I'm thinking, well, you do what you always planned to do
Yes.
because this was always part of the plan. Whether the bridge is out or not
Right.
doesn't matter at this point
Yes.
because you're across the bridge. And your plan was never to go back across the bridge. You don't need that bridge anymore for
Right.
your intents and purposes.
Yeah.
You just continue on about with what you were doing. Everyone survived. It's not like anyone was injured at this point or dead. So there, I'm not sure what the hangup is here. Your plan, as it was when you set out this morning, is still perfectly in motion.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. Because I see, I was wondering if maybe they were planning on doing an out and back, and they were telling Luke, like, listen, Luke, if you cross the bridge, you have to cross it. That's the only way to go back if you cross it once.
But he said,
But he said the
um,
gondola. But he did mention the gondola.
he
He said,
did, yeah, in the
okay,
very beginning. He's
yeah,
like, there's. I mean, that's the impression I got anyway, is that they
right,
were going to be ending up in a different place from where they started.
hmm,
Or going down a different way from how they went. Basically, I didn't get the impression they were backtracking. Maybe
right,
I misunderstood, but it's not the impression I got. So I was thinking, well, and they even, yeah, and then after they're across there and they're talking about it, he's like, we have to make it to the gondola before dark. I was like,
yeah,
okay, so clearly you know that there's a way to do that.
right.
Why are we having this conversation? Just go.
Yes, yes, I agree. I mean, for me, I thought, yeah, the gondola thing, I did, I did understand about, not doing the gondola. The other thing is, that that Fred guy, his friends kind of, they let Fred lead them into situations. But the whole thing with Luke, where he's like, you can go back and meet us at the car, like that is, you can just go back and meet us at the car. How is Luke going to get back and meet them at the car?
Yeah,
What is he going to?
yeah.
They're going to give him a rope so he can rappel down that rock that got back to the car. He wasn't going to be able to go back, and so that's that's the worst thing. That always happens. Like when people are like, hey, you can just go. Because Fred's mindset is, I'm doing this. I'm not letting Luke prevent
Right.
me from
You're
doing
not
this.
going to get in my way.
Yeah, I need this feather in my cap. I need this one. I need to check this one off my list. And I don't care who I have to take with me. The reality is probably Fred and Karen could have done this trip by themselves, the two of them. They didn't need to take everybody else with them. But I guess, what was it? William was the bald guy. I think he had some experiences, so maybe they wanted him around. And Chloe maybe does this kind of thing for Karen, so that's why they brought her. But it seemed like Karen was cool. She had a good rapport with Fred. But you really, that's one of the things, like when you do a big trip like that, you need to go into it. Fred broke rule number one, and that was he didn't know the experience of his people, or he figured he could get them through it, despite the
Hmm.
experience. Yeah, so it was all, it was, but you know it the moment you see the sign that says the trail's closed, and he decides to go for it anyway, that the whole thing's going to be sautéed in wrong sauce.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one thing you learn from watching horror movies is obey the signs.
Yes.
You obey the signs and you don't make fun of the locals. Those are
Yes.
those are two rules that you need if you're in an unfamiliar situation,
Hmm.
a fish out of water situation. If you're traveling through the sticks anywhere,
Yeah.
through the mountains or through the woods or through any kind of redneck country, you never make fun of the locals,
Right.
and you always if a sign says that something is dangerous or bridge is out or road is closed, then you go another way. You
Yeah.
just figure that out. Unless, of course, you figure it might have been put there as a detour by the cannibalistic rednecks, then maybe you shouldn't do it. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I guess it's a judgment call.
No, because the detour was put there to keep you away from the cannibalistic
Right,
rednecks.
yeah, and like in
Yep.
this situation, if they had followed if
Right.
they had followed that sign, they would not have been in the situation they were in at all.
This is the kind of the most unique situation in that they the sign, maybe the sign was in Croatian, maybe they couldn't read what it said, but it's perhaps the sign said don't go in there because a lot of other hikers have gone up there and not come back, and so that's it, no more going up there. um, and you get the sense that's why they decided to close that trail, is because
Hmm.
when too many people are dying, you close the trail. That's what you do. um, and so that's why they probably closed it. And what that means, of course, is too, when a trail is closed, it's no longer maintained. And
Hmm.
so when it's no longer maintained, the cables on the rope bridge, the cables the metal steps that surround the rocks, the cable that you hook into, all of that stuff is not going to be cared for. Um, you have park people that go in there with their equipment. They usually use their own ropes and whatnot, and they rappel down with their tools, and they do repairs. They keep everything in good shape. So if the trail hasn't been used for a good amount of time, and you're relying on it for things like this, there's a trail that my friend Mark and I take. There's a peak in New Hampshire called Owl's Head, and it's one of the 4,000 footers in New Hampshire. Which people listening from Colorado right now, you can laugh all you want at us for our 4,000 footers with your 14ers. But no, that's
They're too busy laughing at me about the botanical
that,
garden.
well, yeah. So I've done some 14ers out there in Colorado, and they have kicked my ass. So I am willing to let them laugh all they want at my 4,000 footers. Um, but one of them, Owl's Head, has a trail to it that is not an official trail. So that means it's not maintained by the Park Service. What's happened is there are some people who have adopted this mountain because it's so remote. It takes 10 miles just to get to it. So or it's like 9 miles to get to it. So it's like an 18-mile day, but because the 9 miles are pretty much flat until you get to the actual peak itself, it's doable to do it all in one day, which is what we did. But when you get to it, the trail itself, it is, it's just what it is. But because we're not relying on things to hike up the trail, we're just relying on our feet to go up the trail. It's okay, right? We know what we're doing with it. But I think if it was an unmaintained trail and we had to rely on things like cables, that's a
Hmm.
different story. That's not safe. And so, this is Fred. This is Fred. He thinks he can do anything. He wants to have this feather in his cap, and I think it's the thing that allowed us as the viewer to say to divorce ourselves a little bit from the situation, so that we could. I don't want to say point our fingers at the crew and give them an "I told you so," but there is always something about it that I guess maybe as horror people we need to be able to feel like we have some out. Like this couldn't necessarily, we imagine what it's like for the people, but also we can tell ourselves this would not happen to me. You know, I would have been smart enough and not allowed this guy to get me.
Yeah, well, yeah. That kind of reminds me of. I just read this story this morning about this man in Texas who was um, at I think it was a lake or some body of water, and there were signs posted that there was no swimming because of alligators.
Right.
And um, he actually said, according to the police officer that was on the scene, he actually said, "Fuck that alligator," and then jumped into the water, and almost immediately started screaming for help.
Yes.
And he was killed
Right.
by this alligator. And I'm sitting here reading this article going, am I supposed to feel sorry for this guy?
Yeah.
Because I kind of don't.
No.
I mean, if you are, I mean, not only are you flouting the rule. I mean, they outright said alligators. It's not just
Right. It
no
wasn't written in
swimming.
Croatian either. It was in English.
No, it was in English. It was
Yes.
no swimming alligators, and you're like, and the words "fuck the alligator" come out of your mouth right before you dive into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm sorry. That's Darwinism at work. You get what you get.
Yeah.
I don't feel sorry for you because you're an arrogant bastard. And it's like those people who keep going swimming in North Carolina, even though there have been 8 shark attacks
Yeah.
in like 2 weeks. And like, get out of the water.
Hey.
What is it going to take?
Yeah, I grew up near the beach. I grew up every summer. I look forward, especially when I lived in Maine. Every summer I look forward to going to the beach, swimming in the beach. But if somebody told me that there were sharks in the water, I would say, "Well, this year I'm going in the pool." You know?
Yeah, my ass is staying on.
Yeah.
I love the ocean. I
Yeah.
love, love, love the ocean. But if there had been 7 previous shark attacks
Yeah.
in just a matter of weeks in this area, my ass is staying on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. I'm just because I'm not a moron,
Right.
because I'm not going to tempt fate. Because I don't have that, it's not going to happen to me. I mean, it's
Right.
going to happen to anyone.
Yes.
Anyone who puts themselves in that situation. It doesn't matter your experience. It doesn't matter because the sharks don't care about your experience.
Right.
That alligator didn't care about how that guy's experience.
No.
And this mountain didn't give a shit about Fred's experience.
Well,
So
and that's the thing with the mountain that makes the mountain, and I guess on some level it makes Anton a different kind of villain, right? Because he's a human, and for the most part you feel like he can't be reasoned with. But that's the thing, you can't reason with a shark, you can't reason with an alligator, and you can't reason with a mountain, right? These things that like just like in your situation with the botanical gardens, you can't reason with the trails in the botanical gardens. You can't reason with the dark. You can't say, "Oh, come on now," because the dark's not going to say, "Oh, okay, all right, let me lighten up for you, and you can see the trail," and the rock's not going to say, "Oh, you know what, let me flatten out a little bit for you, and you can go over it." You know what I mean? It's there, and you have to deal with it, and it can be really frustrating, it can be really nerve-wracking, it can be scary, and so yeah, I think that's what makes the nature such a frightening villain and such a real villain because you can't reason with it.
yeah, well, that's an excellent point. And apparently, you can't always reason with humans either.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
Anton didn't seem to have too many shits to give about what they thought.
No.
Um,
No, he didn't.
I would like to talk for a second about Chloe and
Yes.
how badass she became at
Mm-hmm.
the end. We get great. Okay, Luke. I wanted to string him up
Yes.
when he kicked William in the face and knocked him down into the cellar, basically planning to leave him there to die.
Mm-hmm.
And attempts to take Chloe with him because it's clear throughout the entire movie Luke has had this real problem with William. He obviously is in love with Chloe.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this whole thing going on anyway, and he was kind of a dick about it.
Yes.
And then he goes and just kicks the guy in the face, and with the intent to let him die. And I'm like, that is a dick move.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows at this point he knows that they're in the lair of this crazy mountain man,
Mm-hmm.
and if he leaves him there, he's going to die. They've seen severed heads, they've seen, their friends get killed. There is no question what's going to happen to anyone who's left here. So it's not like he can say, "Oh, I didn't know he would kill him." No, he knew.
Mm-hmm.
So and then he just runs. Now he does come back,
Right.
which it puts me in a little bit of a quandary because I'm like, damn it, he did come back, and then, but I don't know if that's enough. Like, I don't know if
But
that's
who
enough.
did he come back for? Who
He
did
came back for Chloe.
Right.
I guess he still probably would have said fuck William, but
Yeah.
and then of course later he's hanging off a cliff and William's gripping him, and I knew he was gonna drop his ass. I knew it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, and I don't know if I blame him. I'm like,
No.
you just kicked me in the face down there,
Yes.
trying to leave me to die. I probably would drop you off the side of the mountain.
Well, and what's interesting too is the way that was one area where the dubbing was really good because the guy who was doing William's voice did a really great job of infusing that with a little bit of fake fake.
Oh,
Oh, oh no!
oh no, he's
Oh no!
slipping.
He's slipping! Oh no!
Oh no.
It was really good the way he said that. It was
It was, and the look on his face
Mhm.
was classic because
Yes.
Chloe couldn't see his face as he's
No.
hanging over the side of the cliff,
Yeah.
looking dead in Luke's face right as he drops him. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and only to then get an arrow to the back of the head 2 minutes later,
Yes.
when Anton catches up to him. But then this is the part I love. Uh, yeah, all right, William and Chloe are hugging because he's trying to comfort her because
Right.
Luke has just gone off the side of the cliff.
Mhm.
And he then gets an arrow in the back of the head
Mhm.
via Anton from across the way. Chloe sees this and she takes off running. Now, I think I am in love with this misdirection here. It's just a brief moment of misdirection with the camera work where it appears that she is running away
Mhm.
from him, which would be what you would do in a situation like this. Only we get then another angle. We get the angle of Anton as he's attempting to reload his put a new bolt in his
Mhm.
thing, his
Oh, the
thing,
crossbow.
the
The
crossbow.
crossbow.
Thank you.
Yes.
He's trying to put a new bolt in his crossbow, and then she just comes out of nowhere and attacks him. So, and she just goes like apeshit on him. Like she is beating the crap out of him, and I love that because
Mhm.
for 1 second it looked like she was running away, but no, she was actually running to him. She is like, I am gonna kill you, motherfucker.
Yeah, I've
That's
had it. Yeah.
and she's like, I will take you apart with my bare hands. And I mean, you could see the rage on her face, and you could just see the adrenaline
Mhm.
pumping through her veins. I was in love with her at that moment.
Yeah, didn't you
I
get a
was,
sense that there was a little bit of that in her? There were a couple times where we always felt like Fred was in control, but there were a couple times where Chloe was the one who said, no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, or we're going,
oh yeah, when Luke was coming across the bridge and he froze,
yeah,
Chloe was the one that went out and said, "Luke, come to me." Come, she
yes,
calmed him down. She got him to move forward. So it was clear that she had. And there was, when he was hanging off the side of the mountain after they told him to clip his, hang
hmm
from his belt, and he wouldn't do it, and she's trying to get him to relax. I think it was clear that she had a level head,
hmm
that she. It was not out of character for her to take charge of a situation,
hmm
or to at least keep a level head throughout
yeah,
a stressful situation. So, yeah, I mean, I can see that she was a strong character pretty much through the whole thing. And then when she unleashed herself on this guy,
yeah.
I was
Oh,
so
it was good.
excited.
It was
I
good.
was so excited. Like, I love her. I love her right now. She is the best.
Yeah.
And she wasn't taking any more crap. And
No,
just,
no.
um, that was just brilliant. And I think really well done.
Yeah, I like that stuff. I liked a lot of that, and of course What's interesting is she is a doctor, right? I think she's a doctor, not a nurse. Her character.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wasn't quite sure about was those flashback scenes,
Yeah.
and I was hoping maybe you got something that I didn't because I think I must have missed something.
I got the sense that something happened where when she was as a doctor where somebody died under her care, and it was either because she did something wrong, or she didn't do as much as she could, or she thought she let somebody down. I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah. So because she has a chance to kill Anton at the end there, and he's
And she
helpless.
should have done it.
Yeah.
She should have done it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know it looked for all the world like he wasn't going to make it, but I deliver that final blow. I'm not walking away from that killer until I know he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to set him on fire, I will.
Yes.
Personally, I probably would have kicked his ass off the side of the mountain.
I think that's the better way to go.
But I was like, "What are you doing? Don't walk away." I mean, just you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And
Not
then as
good.
we see, and then comes the other thing. The one last thing that I have issue with is as she's zip lining across which looked really fun.
Mm-hmm.
She's zip lining back across the bridge there, or where the bridge was. Um, then we see him pull out his knife, and because he's not dead, and he's clearly going to follow her.
Mm-hmm.
But and then you get you hear the snapping of the cable. What exactly did he do? Because I don't know what the hell, unless he had a Ginsu knife.
Right.
I don't see him being able to slice through a steel cable.
Yeah. Did he cut where it was? Did he cut? It was attached to a tree, and he cut the tree. I don't know.
Well, I don't. I mean, he didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't actually show us
Yeah.
what he did. It's just you sort of got the impression that he made the cable snap, or that it was,
Maybe
you
pried
heard
open the
cable
belts,
snap.
the bolts.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we saw the knife in his hand 1 second, and then like you heard it the next second, and you
Yeah.
heard it drop. And I'm like, what? There's no way you cut that cable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not buying that for a second.
Hmm.
So I guess it's just sort of meant to be ambiguous, maybe. We do know that she wasn't found. That the only body they did find was Luke
Luke.
at the bottom, right, from when he fell off the side of the mountain. So everyone else was never found.
Hmm.
Which I think is kind of, I like the bleakness of that ending. Anton is apparently still out there, and she, even though she was a badass, and even though she was quite the heroine at the end, and I was loving her character for that. In the end, it didn't really do her any good,
Right.
and so that's sad because I really liked her character, but at the same time, it's. I mean, we get these days we get a lot of nihilistic endings where it's like, everybody dies, and sometimes I think that can be a little over the top. Just because we've gotten a lot of them, especially in the horror genre lately. There's just been a big push toward no happy endings. Where like in the '80s, everything had a happy ending,
Right.
and there was always the final girl
I was
or
gonna say.
whatever. Nowadays, it's people have kind of turned toward the bleaker endings, which is a lot of times a good thing. I think used sparingly, it can make for a really effective film.
Hmm.
If you care about the characters just right, if things fall into place just right, and you end it like that, it can really affect you on an emotional level, and I think that's a good thing. Here, I think it worked. I think it made me really sad, but and that's what it's supposed to do. I mean, it wasn't crying or anything,
Right.
but I was like, damn it, it's kind of like when I'm watching Game of Thrones, and the most often heard phrase around our house while watching Game of Thrones is, "Oh man, I liked her," or
Hmm.
"Oh man, I liked him," because
Yeah.
someone's always getting killed, and it's always someone that I liked.
Right.
And that's kind of like the the that's kind of like the response I had at the end of this movie. I was like, "Oh man, I liked her."
Hmm.
So, but I think I'm okay with the ending the way it is. I think it's, and then it sort of leaves it open, um, so that there is still something sinister out there, and people will still continue to disappear.
Well, yeah. What I liked about the ending too was that I thought they played it right the way they did it. I think, like you said, the nihilistic ending. Sometimes it could just be nihilistic for the sake of being nihilistic. But
Right.
this one, they get out of the cabin, they escape, and you feel like, okay, they're getting somewhere. They're the sun's out, right? There's always that sense that
Mhm.
once you hit the daylight, that you're safe. Yes. So
Yes.
so this film took a lot of what we think of. I don't know if you want to call them tropes or mainstays of horror films. And this film took a lot of those and kind of played with our own. How do you want to say, our own
Like our expectations.
expectations, exactly what we expect to happen, just from see, they almost like it was almost like it was that ending was really for horror fans, people who've seen a lot of horror movies, to say like, okay, it's daylight, they've made it, okay, it's this part, they've made it. And it turned out there was never any they made it never quite got there, but they gave us all of the goalposts that we would expect to see.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the daylight too, because I even noticed. I was like, "Wow, it's already daylight." I was like, "It's light outside. How is it daylight already?" And then I said, "Well, I guess it was because all that time that they were hanging in the basement, before they made the escape. I guess that was pretty much all night."
Hmm.
And there is a sense of relief that comes with daylight, regardless of the situation.
Yeah.
It, with, like, for instance, with vampires, there's a reason that
Yes.
daylight makes you feel better, because
Hmm.
they're not going to get you in the daylight.
Yeah.
With a werewolf, they're not going to get you in the daylight because they change with the full moon. So if
Hmm.
the moon is down, then they're no longer a werewolf. But in any situation, somehow daylight always makes it better.
Hmm.
Whenever I've been frightened, I mean, there have been times like when I lived alone that I would watch something that would freak me out or something, and then I have a very vivid imagination, and the least little sound, and I'm like, what? And there have been a couple of nights in my life, like maybe when I was a kid or even not so much kid, when I have freaked myself out to the point that I couldn't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I would end up staying up until the break of dawn. And then once daylight hit, then I would be able to go to sleep because things just aren't. God, this episode should be called like Jamie is a pussy. It's,
No, but it's a good point.
but
It is. It's a good point. Like everybody, you feel better. Like once the light comes and you can see everything, you feel better. You feel like you've made it. And this film, the way Luke, especially, because Luke is the one who's outside when the daylight hits. When Luke's outside when the daylight hits, I think the way he reacts to the daylight, like there's a sense of relief. I think it really kind of pervades everything in the film, and like you said, it plays on our own expectations and our own feelings about daylight. That like, oh, it's safer now, and I see. For me, it's always been kind of the different one for me, where if I can't sleep at night, when it suddenly becomes daylight, I feel like, oh no, what happened? I didn't make it.
I missed it.
I missed it, and now it's daylight. Now I'm in trouble, And when I hear those birds, they're in Maine, they're chickadees that make this little noise. And I bought Jen a little chickadee, stuffed chickadee in Maine when I was there one time, and it has inside of it a little box that you can press it, and it will play the sound that a chickadee makes. And so I remember, like, if I'd be with my friends, we'd be playing video games. If 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning rolled around, you started to hear the chickadees. Then you knew you had done it.
Oh,
you're gonna have
I
a
know.
yeah.
I know what that's like. I mean, being a teenager, like you'd end up staying up till and we would always like our goal was to get to bed before we heard the birds
Yes.
because it's like yeah, you want to stay up late and you're having fun or whatever, but I did not want to stay up so late that it became daylight because then you'd
Yes.
end up sleeping late, and I didn't want to
Mhm.
do that. I never liked sleeping late. It made me feel weird.
Mhm.
So we're always like, no, I hear the birds. We got to go to bed. We got to go.
Yes.
But yeah, so I get that. But there is an inherent feeling of safety that comes with daylight
Mhm.
and the break of dawn, and there's that saying, and I think it's a saying for a reason, that everything looks better in the light of day,
Yeah.
and it's true. It's you somehow feel like whatever the bad thing is that was after you, it doesn't seem so bad
Mhm.
when daylight's here. I don't
Yeah.
know, when the sun is out. It
Yeah.
just So yeah, so we've got that going for them, and they've escaped the place. It all seems it all seems like it's going in the right direction.
Yes. And I thought I think if you're going to do the nihilistic ending, like you said, if you're going to as it was unfortunately snuff out the final girl, if that's how you're going to play it, I think you've got to play it right. You've got to do it, and I think this film did that. I think this film it didn't just whack everybody per se, to just call it good. I think it did play it right the way it did, and I think that was good.
Yeah, I'll go along with that.
Yeah.
I was, overall, I was pretty happy with
Yeah.
this movie. I think I liked it more than Brian did. I think he at one point referred to it as a half-ass slasher film, and then he was just like, I really don't care. I'm like, no, I like it.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that the sense of man versus nature that we get
Mhm.
in the beginning,
Mhm.
where it's before the secondary element is introduced. It's just them against the mountain, and then you discover that that's not the only thing they have to worry about.
Right.
I like that, and I thought there was a good bit of action.
Mhm.
I enjoyed the characters enough. I particularly liked Chloe,
Yes.
so I was in it. I enjoyed it all the way through, and I made the connection to the descent, and it kind of does the same thing. In the beginning, it's them versus nature, and then there's another element introduced, and
Yeah.
it becomes a whole other ball game. That film is definitely superior, and it is it is done much better. But I think I kind of wonder if the people who made this film are fans of that film because I can
Yes.
kind of see the elements there.
And that could be, that could be it too. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with saying like, okay, this film was maybe in the mold, or maybe even it was ripping off, or however you want to say it. You can always say it's a derivative of. I think it's okay to say that and say, you know what, I still like it. Maybe the other one was more original. I think that one did it more for me, but this one was still good. It still did what it was supposed to do, which it made me afraid, and it made me root for people, and it made me excited and sad about people dying. I
Hmm.
think I think it did what it was supposed to do. But I agree. I haven't seen The Descent, but it sounds like I just seeing other things, thinking about like Wrong Turn, thinking about The Hills Have Eyes, those kind of films, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think this film borrowed a lot from those as well. So especially when things switched over. From to having the killer and the Mad Woodsman, I felt like it was covering a lot of I don't want to say well-worn territory, but worn enough. But I still think it did its job. It did what it was supposed to do, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong either. I mean, this is one thing is if they did take inspiration from the Descent, like I mentioned,
Hmm.
then I kind of like the fact that the Descent was all underground
Right.
because they were spelunking, and this is completely the opposite.
Yes.
So if that was in fact the inspiration for this, I really like it. They like it. They pretty much took it and turned it on its head,
Hmm.
and I think that what you got here was a, a really good example of how nature itself can be just really frightening. And
Yeah.
because I think that worked. I think throughout the entire first portion of this film, it really worked. You got some amazing views, but you also got some really good views of people dangling close to death
Hmm.
that I thought were pretty realistic. When Luke was on the bridge and he was frozen, and you got the shots of him looking down, like you got the viewpoint of him looking down, I was putting myself in that situation,
Yes.
thinking I would probably be like sitting on the board scooting forward like Vern
Yes.
in Stand By Me or something like that,
Right.
or crawling across,
Well, I've had an experience not quite like that. Going out to there's in New Hampshire, there's this area called the Frankenstein Cliffs, which was actually named after an artist whose last name was Frankenstein, but they that's what they called it. But and he liked to paint them. And so you have to get to them to do the ice climbing. You have to walk across this train bridge. It's like for a small cog railway that runs through the area for scenic things. But you have to cross that, and it gets up about 40 feet high. Um, and so, when the bridge goes over this big gorge area, it's about 40 feet up. And there's all there is for a railing is this kind of open, like just like bar that goes, kind of gets about, like about armpit high, but it's very open. It's not like it's a graded one. And then you're walking across this grate because you don't want to walk on the train tracks because that's just you feel like you make a trip. But you walk across this grate part. So as you walk, you just kind of just have to grit it. As my friend Mark doesn't care. He's not afraid of heights like that, so he doesn't care. So he's constantly like pointing things out to me as I'm trying to just grit it and go, and he's like stopping, and it's like, don't stop, we need to just go. And, one
What the
time
heck?
it was
What?
oh, it was horrible. One time we did it. It was Ice Fest, which Ice Fest is the big ice climbing fest that they have every year in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So we were doing it that day. He was taking me up this one called Bob's Delight, and I remember he was trying out these the way it works is you have your boots and then you put crampons on to be able to dig into the ice, and he was getting these climbing ones that were specifically for ice climbing that had the integrated crampons on them, which meant you couldn't take the crampons off like we usually do. So he had to walk across this grate with these like holes in it with his crampons, and he was like tripping every few steps, and I'm like watching him, was like, oh God, stop trip, which was just
Hmm.
killing me. And then we get to the other side, and we're climbing, and I lost my ice axe. Something happened when I was climbing. I was waiting for something, and I had my ice axe. I thought I had it in enough, and it fell down, and it kind of fell down this hill, and it was way down. So I'm way down, kind of near the bottom of the what that big gorge was, and I'm looking for the ice axe. A guy is crossing the same bridge that we just crossed, and he's just kind of hanging out. And he's pointing down to me. He's like, "Oh, I see your ice axe. It's right there." I'm like, how are these people doing this? They just stand there like it's. I'm just gonna hang out at the top of the bridge, just point things out. So It is like just seeing that man cross that, knowing, I was on a solid surface when I did it, and it was still, it's still frightening. Like I do not like to do any climbing on that one if I can help it, But of course, again, Mark's like, you just got to do it a lot of times and you'll get used to it. I don't think you get used to that. I think you either have that in you or you don't, or maybe if you're at a young age you do it. I don't know, but so I felt for Luke for sure when I saw that.
No, I've always I agree with that. I think I don't think it's the kind of thing that you can just get used to. Maybe some people can if they're not as severely frightened.
Right.
But as a kid, I used to love to climb up on the roof.
Hmm.
And I would climb up on the roof of the garage, and then my friend and I would get up there, like we'd climb a ladder to get on top of the garage, and we would sunbathe on top of the garage because, I guess we just really wanted cancer or something. I don't know. I don't know what that was about. But I used to love to do it, and I would just be on the garage every second. Getting up there was fine, but I would
Getting down.
always have a little mini heart attack when it was time to get down.
Hmm.
And somehow the next time I wanted to get up there, I would always forget that
Right.
getting down was a bitch. But but I've always had a really easy time going up high places. That doesn't bother me,
Hmm.
but it's the descending high places that really freaks me out
Yeah.
when I can see down, like when I can see how high off the ground I really am. So that whole thing about just don't look down,
Yes.
it's true.
Yes.
Um,
It,
I get there was this creek that we used to cross all the time as a kid, and there was a fallen log that we would use as a bridge. I could run across that thing as long as I looked straight ahead and just forgot about the fact that there was rushing water and rocks beneath me.
hmm
And when I say creek, it wasn't just like a little trickling creek. It was really deep, and there were some jagged rocks and quite a bit of water. But the if I was walking across, if I stopped for any reason,
hmm
if I looked down for any reason, then I couldn't do it. Then I would have to sit down and scoot across the log because it would freak me out.
hmm
So it's weird, and we used to do it all the time. It never got any better.
Right.
I don't care how many times I did it. It
Yeah.
never got good.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't the kind of thing that I could get used to. And being in that situation, I'd freeze.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right. And you see what happens when Luke freezes, right? He puts stress on the bolts because again,
Right.
this thing hasn't been serviced in however long it's been since they closed the trail down. So it's not being serviced. He's taking up time because he's on it, putting stress, and then Karen starts to go out to him. Chloe starts to go. It causes a problem. That's why you can't. It's important to not be like Fred and try to drag people along on these things. Like Mark always jokes with me about there's a peak in Colorado. I think it's called Capitol Peak. It's either Capitol or Pyramid, but I think it's Capitol. To get to the summit, you have to cross a 1,000 foot long knife's edge, which means like you can't really walk across it, right? It's so sharp along the top. And he said, I can't remember if he said it's a 3,000 or 7,000 foot drop down, but figuring that you are already up about 12,000
Either
feet.
one of those will kill
Either
you.
one's
So
bad. Yeah, neither one's good. So he said that you would just scooch across it. You just get down on your butt. And you have to scooch across. And he always jokes, is like, because he's a very crass individual, which is why we love him. He's gonna be like, Poirier, you get up there on that knife's edge on Capitol Peak. I'll show you that. You'll need a new set of drawers the moment you take a look at that thing. So and I mean, but the thing is, like, when he tells me that he needed to get down on his butt and scooch across, the same guy who could stop and take a look over at the 40, it tells you how bad that is. And I remember we were reading about another guy who hikes that peak. His name's Gary Roach or Jerry Roach. He's like the kind of the guru of the 14ers. He has the guidebook and everything. The way he described to get across that knife's edge is you get your hand on the knife's edge part, hold on to your hand, and then walk your feet across. So you're kind of like hanging over the edge, walking yourself across it. It was just like, I can't imagine anybody doing that. But yeah, I think it's, like, for me, I see 1,000 feet across, 3,000 feet down, or so, whatever the number is, and I've got to scooch my butt across. I'm probably turning around and going back. I don't know if I need the peak that bad.
yeah, because I mean, what I'm afraid of is that this is the thing is I'm not really afraid of that the obstacle itself
Right.
because people have gone across it and they're fine.
Right.
It's me that
Yes.
I'm afraid of
Exactly.
because if I lose my nerve, I will freak out and fall. I
Yeah.
mean, if I get inside my own head, then I will be the cause of my demise.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know my own limitations,
Right.
and I know what I would be capable of in specific situations like that. And so that's why I avoid them,
Yes.
because I would end
Exactly.
up killing myself, because
Right.
I can't do, and it's not the kind of thing that's like, oh, just get over it. And I was actually thinking about that
Yeah.
when they were going across the bridge. I was just like, God, I'm sure to Fred, Luke probably looks kind of like a wuss, because he's frightened and he's frozen and he can't do this, and Fred's probably thinking, even though he never said it or anything like it, he was very supportive, but in his head he's probably thinking, God, dude, just get over it.
Hmm.
And then I was thinking, you can't, like, if you're the kind of person who can do this with no issue, you will never understand what it's like for the people who can't,
Right.
who can't just get over it.
Hmm.
And it doesn't make you any less brave,
Right.
because it's not the kind of thing that you can just buck up and do. I mean, it's I can't but there's something just inside you, and I don't think you can change that.
No.
And it doesn't, I don't think it makes you a wuss. I think it just, because you could be just as powerful in a different situation. Like, you might be okay with taking on a grizzly bear toe to toe,
Yes.
but put you a couple thousand feet above ground, and your knees start to shake. There's really nothing you can do about that. And then I was just like, God, it's so hard, because they don't understand it. Like, if you
Yeah.
if you don't have an issue with that, you will never understand what it's like
Right.
to have an issue with that. I went through this whole thing in my head during that scene, which to me is another indication that they did a good job,
Yes.
because I'm having this whole conversation with myself inside my head, because I am there with them while they're doing it, and I'm feeling what they're going through, you know?
Yeah, it's what I loved about this film is that Luke is supposed to be he's us, even though he's not us, right? Because he does some really shady things that we would not do. When we're doing the hiking part, he is us. And he's us in a lot of ways. When he's hanging on there and they keep telling him, stop holding with your arms. You've got to
Hmm.
rest back there. I know what that's like when I first started climbing. Like you do everything with your arms. And like I remember Karen told him to stay on his feet or to put his weight on his feet. You don't think of that, right?
Hmm.
You want to hold. You want to hold on to everything, and an experienced climber knows where to put their feet so they don't put as much pressure on their arms. They know how to find places to rest too. That when we look at them, we're like, "Oh my God, I could barely fit a toe there," and they can rest there. But so I thought they did a really great job of establishing that Luke is supposed to be the one that we identify with going through that part of it, and we can say, "Oh man, that's scary." And so, like you said, you thought what Luke you thought you tried to imagine what Luke was going through, and you were able to kind of identify. And that was something that I wrote down in my notes. I said we're supposed to be Luke, and I really like that part of it.
I do too.
Well, we've already crossed the hour. This is not a bad deal. We usually it's like about 10 minutes ahead of this that we usually start the process of discussing what else we've got going on. But hey, I think we did all right here. This one I don't think is quite Zombievers, but it's good enough to keep our streak going for sure. It's definitely. I think it's worth checking out. I think the dubbing thing is something that you'll get over within 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I did. And I mean, we both said it. We both of us had issue with it in the very beginning,
Mhm.
and then it just kind of fell away.
Yeah,
It just was not no longer an issue for me.
yeah,
So I would recommend this. I think if you like any of the movies that that were brought up during the discussion, then you should check it out.
yeah.
And I think if you're a climber, you should check it out. Or if
Hmm.
you, I mean, I don't know. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was impressed with that. I was kind of worried we might lose our streak,
Me too.
but
Yeah, that dubbing,
I think we're doing all right.
we're doing all right. So we'll see what happens for next week. But before that, let's take a look at what we've got going on. Again, I'm going to get it out of the way right away because again, it's a whole lot of nothing on my end. Just the podcast right now. But hopefully, I don't know about the blog when we'll get the blog going. Though I will say, work has eased up a bit now. So I'm hoping soon we'll get that going on. But Jamie, how about you? What have you been up to?
Well, The usual stuff. There's a new episode of Evil Podcast. There's a new episode of Evil episodes out right now, and we're going to be recording a new one later. But the one that's out now has us talking about Killdozer, the TV
That's
movie from
right.
'70s, and so that's out and available now. You should check that out. And this isn't exactly me, but I'm so proud that I have to mention it. Brian has a new book out, and this is for anyone who is a fan of shapeshifters, werewolves, really any kind of shapeshifter. This is a collection of stories about shapeshifters,
Mhm.
and he's stepped away from Cthulhu mythos for this one. This is pure horror, and it's from April Moon Books, and it's called Fleshlight Smoke. So it's available on Amazon now. Go check it out, because he has brought together some really amazing authors as usual, and some incredible stories. And if that piques anyone's interest out there, I just want to give that a little push because I'm so proud of him. He works so
Yeah.
hard, and he's so good at putting together anthologies. It's amazing the stories he's able to pull from people. They're all very original, all very interesting, and he has high standards for that. Like, he won't just take anything, and so it's worth your time to check it out.
So now,
Also,
before we move ahead, now if we go to Amazon, you just type in Brian Salmons. He has
yeah,
his author page.
he does have an author page on Amazon that you can check out there. That'll bring up anything he's done, but you can go to, if you want that book specifically, just type in "Flesh Like Smoke,"
Okay.
and it will bring that one up. Or you can go to the April Moon website. April Moon Books
Okay.
is the publisher for that one. And that's a fairly new publisher.
Mhm.
And it was Brian's idea to do a werewolf anthology because the name of the publishing company is April Moon. And so he's like, we kind of have to.
Yes.
So that was what that was born of.
Cool.
So I recommend that. Check it out. And then just check out everything else from April. He's got another book from April Moon that came out a while back. So, um, yeah, so there's that little shameless plug, but I'm
Yeah.
proud of him. I
Of
can't help
course.
it.
Definitely.
Plus, he's a big supporter of the show. So
Exactly. And so more than right. It definitely with all the support that he's done for us on the show, that there's no problem with giving him a little plug here too as well. Definitely. With all we've put him through with our movies.
and really, I don't have a whole lot else going on. I haven't been doing a lot of recording lately,
Oh.
so
So
I
you're in
think
my boat.
caught up. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. Well, I guess that's a good a place to leave it as Eddie then, Jamie. Again, I think I'm pretty stoked here. We're three in a row here, so we'll see what happens next week with number 4. As always, everyone, again, I'm kind of been lax on getting the podcasts onto the archive page on my site and getting on Facebook about that. So remember, you can always go to mattmovieguy.com if you're not getting the episodes right away. You can check out the RSS feed, and also you can always subscribe on iTunes. But thank you all for listening. We'll check you out next week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.